So you want to speak up in meetings, but something stops you every single time. Here's what's really happening and one practical step that you can try today. So for many of us, our earliest environments taught us to follow very specific rules, which is to wait your turn, don't interrupt, don't stand out unnecessarily, and stay within whatever structure that our adults have established. And those environments don't teach communication, they actually teach us compliance. They teach us deference. They teach us that silence is the safest option. And that conditioning doesn't just disappear when we enter the workforce. And even if we never consciously think about it, the instinct stays with us and show up years later in our professional lives. On top of that, if you're introverted, if you're someone who needs a moment to think before you speak, that adds an additional layer. And most meetings move really quickly. So by the time that you've organized your thoughts into something clear and intentional, someone else has already taken that floor. And the moment that you were actually waiting for disappeared. And none of this reflects your intelligence or your value. It's a mismatch between your natural processing style and the speed of the dialogue around you. And for anyone who's learned English as an additional language, that's also an additional dimension that people rarely acknowledge because when you're navigating between languages, speaking becomes a multi step process. You're trying to ensure clarity, you're trying to ensure accuracy and professionalism all at the same time. And that alone can create a moment of hesitation. And that hesitation isn't a lack of confidence and it's not about your capability. It's just a natural result of operating in two or more languages at the same time. So this leads me to one of the bigger conversations that is not often had in the workplace, which is the cultures that we come from. And culture plays a far bigger role in workplace communication than most organizations care. And if you're from a country like China, India, Korea, much of Africa, and many parts of the Middle East, they tend to come from more status oriented cultures. And in these environments, people defer to authority, hierarchy, and seniority. So speaking up, especially if it disrupts the flow or challenges someone who is more senior, can be seen as something really disrespectful. Contrast that with egalitarian culture, like Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and many Western European countries. Questioning leadership, offering a different viewpoint, and debating idea is actually considered normal and even encouraged. So when you come from a status-oriented culture and suddenly work within an egalitarian environment, you also carry the values of the culture that you were raised in, even if you've immigrated and even if you've lived abroad for years. And the same thing is true for many second generation or third generation individuals, because even though you were born in an egalitarian country, your home environment is often shaped by the expectations of your family's origin culture. And those early values influence how safe or appropriate it feels to speak up. And I've experienced this myself. So I was born in British Hong Kong and moved to Canada when I was 8 years old. And my family's values stayed with me. Nothing reset when we just landed in Canada. Especially when I was in grade school in Hong Kong, we sat in rows and columns in silence and we copied from the board. We raised our hands to speak and we only spoke when we were called on. And these aren't just random practices, they were an extension of the broader cultural expectations, which is to stay within your role, respect the hierarchy, and not to overstep. And there were no group discussions, no circles, no collaborative activities, no show and tell. So nothing that taught us to use our voice spontaneously or comfortably when we were younger. And those expectations carried into my teenage years, my adulthood, and eventually into my professional life. And when someone grew up in a status oriented system enters into an egalitarian workplace, there is an internal conflict. And it might not even be a conflict that we often think about. It's just subconscious and it's limiting our abilities. So is this even appropriate? Is this disrespectful? Is it too direct? Is it too challenging? Or is this even my place? And as much as we like to think like, no, we've completely overcome those particular thoughts, they are actually living subconsciously in our minds and it's limiting our ability to speak up when it matters. And understanding this difference between status-oriented cultures and egalitarian cultures is one of the first steps towards building a new skill set because you're not abandoning your values, but it's learning to operate effectively and differently within the context that you're in. And that takes practice in real work situations. And we'll talk more about how to strengthen that muscle as this playlist continues. So even within the same country, context matters too. So your company might market itself as a highly inclusive organization, and it might be, but perhaps your direct manager is creating a completely different experience. And if your leader is dismissive or controlling, unpredictable, or openly critical, then of course you will hesitate to speak up. So there's no amount of like speak up more advice that's going to override a lack of psychological safety. So culture and subcultures aren't just theoretical concepts, they also influence our daily behavior. I'll be doing a different playlist for navigating unhealthy and inconsistent leadership styles so that if this applies to you, make sure that you do subscribe and you don't miss this video. So what I want you to take away from this is something simple but very important, that there is nothing wrong with you. You're not too quiet. You're not behind. You're not lacking ambition or confidence. You're simply responding to years of conditioning, cultural norms, lived experiences, and power dynamics that have shaped how safe it feels to use your voice. And if you want to start shifting how you show up at work, start with my free download. It's called Becoming Seen, a Quiet Leader's Identity Workbook. There is room for you to speak up. And because we've been conditioned for such a long time to feel safe in not speaking up, this workbook is going to help you visualize and envision what your future identity can be as that leader that you know that you're more than capable of being. And also, let's face it, people who speak up often aren't necessarily the most knowledgeable or the most capable. They're just operating from a different set of internal rules from us. So your rules are different, and that's okay. And you can learn the new rules without discarding the values that have shaped you. And before we move on to the next video, I want to give you something that is doable within the next 24 hours. So in your next meeting, aim to contribute just one sentence, and it can be a reaction, a clarifying question, really quick insight, or perhaps a summary of what you've heard. And if you find this difficult, this is a reframe that I want you to hold on to. You're not hesitant because you're incapable. You're hesitant because you've been conditioned to be careful. And careful thinkers bring clarity when they speak, even if it's brief. So the goal is to enter the conversation. It's not to dominate it. And that's how you begin building the muscle. And that's where the shift can start to begin. So in the next video, we're going to talk about imperfect speaking and the idea that you don't need a perfectly polished thought to be a part of the discussion. I'll walk you through how to speak up even if you're not fully ready, and how to interrupt someone who is dominating the conversation without feeling like you're being abrupt or having to feel uncomfortable about it. It's a skill that you can absolutely learn, and once you understand how to use it, you're going to feel more in control of your presence in any room. So I'll see you in the next video.